and stained with grease from years of fixing broken things in his small repair shop. He did not want to be here. He had come to the auction only because staying home in his empty apartment was becoming unbearable. The silence there was too heavy. The rooms were too quiet. Every corner reminded him of Eleanor, her favorite chair, the books she left on the table, the coffee cup she had used every morning. So he decided to go out, to do something different, to find any reason to not think about his loss. The auction hall was filled with people. Some were collectors looking for rare items. Others were traders hoping to find something valuable that they could sell for profit. Most were like Robert, ordinary people searching through lots of forgotten things. The items on display were mostly useless. Rusted engines from old transport ships sat next to corroded solar panels. Broken computer systems and damaged machinery filled the shelves. Nobody seemed excited about any of it. Robert moved from lot to lot, not really looking for anything in particular. He was just walking, just existing, just trying to pass the time. Then something made him stop. His heart beat faster. He could not believe what he was seeing. On platform 247 there was a creature. Not a machine. Not a piece of equipment. An actual living, or once living, creature. It was enormous. Its body was covered in scales that were the color of deep crimson, almost like dark red wine. The scales seemed to catch the light and hold it, as if they were drinking the light into themselves. The creature had wings, large and beautiful, folded carefully against its back. Along its body, strange symbols and patterns rippled across the scales like water moving across glass. The patterns glowed faintly, shifting through colors that Robert had never seen before. Robert's breath caught in his throat. He knew what this was. Everyone in the galaxy knew about drakons. They were creatures from ancient history, from stories and legends. They were supposed to be extinct. Dead for 300 years. Nobody had seen a real drakon in modern times. They only existed in history books and old recordings. But here was one. Right in front of him. The auctioneer stood next to the platform looking bored. He did not seem impressed by the creature at all. He checked his data screen and yawned widely. Around Robert, other people were pointing and talking. Some laughed. Some shook their heads. Most simply walked past without much interest. Lot 247, the auctioneer announced in a flat, tired voice. Drakon specimen. Biological asset. Non-functional. Estimated age, indeterminate. Starting bid, 2 credits. 2 credits. That was nothing. That was almost like giving it away for free. Robert knew that 2 credits would not even buy him a decent meal. It was barely worth anything at all. The auctioneer looked around the hall. He waited for someone to bid. Seconds passed. Nobody moved. Nobody raised their hand. Nobody said anything. Going once, the auctioneer said slowly. Robert felt something strange happening inside his chest. He did not know why, but he felt connected to this creature somehow. It was broken. It was unwanted. It was something that everyone else had decided was worthless. He understood that feeling. He felt broken and unwanted too. His wife was gone. His life was empty. He was just going through the days without any real purpose. Going twice, the auctioneer continued. Robert raised his hand. His voice came out quiet and steady, 2 credits. Everyone turned to look at him. The other people in the auction hall stared. Some smiled with pity. Some looked confused. One man near Robert actually laughed out loud. Why would anyone want to buy a dead drakon? Why would anyone waste even 2 credits on something so obviously worthless? Sold, the auctioneer said quickly as if he could not believe his luck. Lot 247 goes to the human in row 7. Robert Hayes had just bought himself a dragon for 2 credits. The other merchants and traders shook their heads as Robert approached the platform. Some muttered jokes about foolish humans throwing away money on nonsense. One old woman told him he should have saved his credits for something useful. But Robert did not listen to any of them. He stood next to the creature and he looked into its face. The drakon's eyes were closed and its body was completely still. It looked like it had been sleeping for a very long time. Robert reached out slowly and touched the creature's scales. They were cold and smooth. He could feel the texture beneath his fingertips. This was real. This was not a trick or a fake. This was an actual drakon and now it was his. He did not know what he was going to do with it. He did not have any plan. But as he stood there in the auction hall, looking at this broken and forgotten creature, something inside Robert's chest shifted slightly. For the first time in 8 months he felt something besides grief. He felt a small spark of curiosity. He felt a small sense of purpose. He had bought a dragon for 2 credits, and nobody knew yet how much this decision would change everything. Robert drove his old transport truck through the dark streets of Station Meridian. The Draken lay in the back, wrapped carefully in soft blankets that he had borrowed from the auction house. He had paid extra credits to have it transported, but the workers looked uncomfortable handling something so rare and strange. Now the creature was in his possession, and he had no idea what to do with it. His repair shop was small and cluttered. Tools hung on every wall. Broken machines waited in corners for Robert to fix them. The shop smelled like oil and metal. It was not the best place to keep a legendary creature, but it was all Robert had. He carefully moved the Draken onto a large work table, making sure it was comfortable. Then he sat down on his old chair and stared at it for hours. The creature did not move. Its eyes remained closed. Its chest did not rise and fall with breathing. Robert began to wonder if it was actually dead after all. Maybe the auctioneer had been right. Maybe this was just a body, a preserved corpse, a leftover from some ancient time. On the third day something changed. Robert was making breakfast when he heard a soft sound from the shop. It was like a whisper but also like electricity moving through the air. He ran downstairs quickly, his heart pounding. What he saw made him stop dead in his tracks. The Draken's scales were glowing. Patterns of light moved across its body like water rippling across a pond. The colors shifted from blue to green to purple and back again. The light was beautiful and strange. And then, slowly, the creature's eyes opened. They were amber-colored, bright and intelligent. Vertical pupils looked directly at Robert. The creature lifted its head slightly, and more patterns of light flashed across its scales. The light seemed to move with purpose, as if the creature was trying to communicate something. Robert did not understand the language of light, but he felt something. It was like emotions flowing directly into his mind. He felt fear. He felt hunger. He felt confusion. He felt hope. The creature was scared, but it was also aware. It was alive. "Easy," Robert whispered softly, moving closer slowly. "Easy, friend. You are safe now." He did not know if the creature could understand his words. He did not know if it could hear him at all. But he kept speaking in a calm, gentle voice as he approached. The Draken's eyes followed him. Its scales glowed brighter. The patterns became more complex and faster. Robert reached out his hand slowly, giving the creature time to pull away if it wanted to. But the Draken did not move. Instead, the light from its scales seemed to reach toward Robert's hand. When his skin touched the creature's scales, he felt a surge of feeling, like stepping into a warm current of water. Images flashed through his mind. He saw stars and galaxies. He saw vast cities made of crystal. He saw pain and fear and loss. Then the moment passed. Robert pulled his hand back gently. The creature made a sound almost like a sigh and lowered its head. The patterns of light became slower, softer, less urgent. Over the next week, Robert learned to read the creature's light language. A rapid flashing meant fear or excitement. Slow, gentle waves meant calm or contentment. When the patterns moved in circles, the creature wanted food. When they turned deep red, something hurt. Robert named the creature Ember, because the light that moved across her scales looked like fire dancing. She was starving. Her bones were too visible beneath her scales. Her wings looked paper-thin and fragile. Robert used the nutrients he kept in storage for broken machines. He mixed dried protein powder with water and minerals, creating a thick paste. He fed it to Ember by hand, spoon by spoon. At first she was too afraid to eat. But hunger eventually won and she began to accept the food. Day after day Robert fed her. He cleaned her scales with soft cloths. He spoke to her in quiet, gentle words, even though he was not sure she understood English. Through her patterns of light, Ember began to tell her story. She was the last Draken alive. Her entire species had been hunted to extinction 300 years ago by the Valerian Empire. They wanted something called biocrystalline cores, special organs inside Draken bodies that could power entire civilizations. Whole planets could be run on the energy from a single core. Ember had been captured when she was just a hatchling, a young creature barely able to fly. She had been sold from one collector to another, from one prison to another. She had been kept in small cages, studied by scientists and examined by traders. She had spent her whole life alone, trapped, waiting for something better that never came. Then she had been put in the auction with a price of just 2 credits, because the people running the auction did not even know what she was. They thought she was dead. They thought she was worthless. As Ember told her story through her patterns of light, Robert felt his own tears falling down his cheeks. He understood loss. He understood what it meant to be alone. He understood what it felt like to be forgotten and unwanted. But here was this creature, a living, breathing being, and Robert was the only one in the entire galaxy who cared about her. He was the only one who saw her value. He was the only one who gave her a second chance. One night, as Robert sat beside Ember, he felt her scales warm beneath his hand. The patterns of light on her body changed to a soft, gentle blue. It felt like gratitude. It felt like trust. It felt like friendship. For the first time since Eleanor died, Robert felt less alone. Robert was working on an old engine when the alert came through on his communication console. The sound was loud and sharp, cutting through the quiet of his workshop. His hands froze. He had never heard that particular alarm before. It meant something important. Something urgent. He walked over to the screen and read the message. His blood turned cold. Alert. Unauthorized biological specimen detected on Station Meridian. All citizens report immediately to authorities. Reward, 50,000 credits. The Valerian Empire demands immediate capture and transfer of specimen to Imperial custody. Someone had seen Ember. Robert's mind raced. He had only brought Ember to his shop 5 weeks ago. He had kept her hidden, away from windows, away from other people. He had been careful. But Station Meridian was a busy place. People came and went. Workers walked past his shop. Someone must have seen the glow of her scales through a window. Someone must have noticed something unusual. Within the hour, things began to happen very quickly. Robert watched from his shop window as the first hunter arrived. It was a woman named Catherine Vale, a bounty hunter known throughout the station for her ruthlessness. She walked down the street with 3 armed men behind her. They were checking every building, every shop, every corner. Robert's heart beat so hard he thought it might break through his chest. Then the military vessels came. 3 large ships took position in orbit above the station. Their weapons systems powered up. People in the streets started running. Panic began to spread. Robert looked at Ember. She was trembling. Her scales were flashing with colors he had never seen before. Dark reds mixed with angry yellows. The patterns moved frantically across her body. Robert could feel her fear through the telepathic connection they had developed. She was terrified. "We have to leave," Robert said quietly. "We have to go now." He had maybe 30 minutes before the bounty hunters reached his shop. He had no time to waste. Robert grabbed a large backpack and started throwing supplies into it. Water bottles. Food. The nutrient paste that Ember needed to eat. His personal records. A few credits that he kept hidden under the floorboards. Money would not last long, but it was all he had. Ember could not walk easily. Her legs were still weak from years of captivity. Robert fashioned a makeshift carrier from old blankets and metal frames, something sturdy enough to hold her weight but light enough that he could move with it. Gently, he helped her into the carrier, and she made soft sounds, patterns of light flickering across her scales. Robert could feel her trust in him even in her fear. His old transport ship sat in the back garage, a vehicle he had bought years ago. It was not in great condition. The engine had problems. The navigation system worked only sometimes. The shields were weak. But it was fast enough, and it was all he had. Robert loaded Ember carefully into the ship's cargo hold. He added the supplies, his tools, anything that might be useful. He left behind almost everything else. His shop. His home. His entire life on Station Meridian. None of it mattered anymore. He heard the sound of boots running down the street outside his shop just as he was sealing the cargo doors. The hunters had found him. But Robert was already moving to the pilot's seat. "Come on, old girl," he whispered to his ship. "We need to move." The engines rumbled to life. They sputtered a few times, threatening to fail, but then they caught and roared to power. Robert pushed the throttle forward as hard as it would go. The ship lifted off the ground, shaking and groaning with the effort. Below, he could see the bounty hunters looking up at the sky, weapons raised but useless. The military vessels in orbit were turning toward him, tracking his escape route. Robert piloted his ship with desperate skill, moving between buildings, using the tight spaces of the station to hide his vessel from the larger military craft. Then something unexpected happened. From the cargo hold, Ember sent out a pulse of energy. Robert felt it move through the ship like a wave. Suddenly, the navigation systems that had been broken for months began to work perfectly. The shields that were supposed to be weak flared to life, glowing bright blue. The engines, old and tired, suddenly ran with smooth efficiency. Robert realized what was happening. Ember was interfacing with the ship. She was using her abilities, whatever those abilities were, to improve the vessel. She was helping him escape. The ship jumped to hyperdrive speed. Station Meridian disappeared behind them in seconds. The outer rim stretched out before them, full of unexplored territory, dangerous asteroid fields, and places where the Valerian Empire's authority did not reach. Robert did not know where they were going. He did not have a plan. He only knew that they had to keep moving, had to keep running, had to stay ahead of the hunters who wanted to capture Ember and take her core. As the ship flew deeper into space, Robert climbed down to the cargo hold to check on Ember. She was glowing softly now, her patterns of light calm and steady. She had used a lot of energy to help him escape. Her scales were dimmer than usual. But when she saw Robert, the light grew brighter. He sat beside her in the hold of his flying ship, surrounded by the vast emptiness of space, and realized that everything had changed. He was no longer a lonely mechanic fixing broken machines in a small shop. He was now a fugitive. He was running from the most powerful government in the galaxy. And he was the protector of the last Draken alive. Robert reached out and touched Ember's scales. Through the telepathic connection he felt her emotions. Gratitude, fear, hope, and something that felt very much like love. "We will be okay," Robert promised her. "I will not let anything happen to you. I will protect you no matter what." Ember's patterns of light turned soft blue, and Robert knew she believed him. Robert's ship flew through empty space for 3 weeks. He had no destination in mind, only the need to keep moving, to stay away from the military vessels that were hunting him and Ember. The ship's systems remained strong because Ember was always connected to it, using her strange abilities to keep the engines running and the shields active. They stopped at small abandoned stations to gather supplies. Robert traded some of his tools and equipment for food and water. Nobody seemed to recognize him or Ember. Out here in the Outer Rim, people minded their own business. They did not ask questions. They did not report strangers to authorities. But Robert knew they could not hide forever. Eventually he would need to understand what was happening. He needed answers. He needed to know why the Valerian Empire wanted Ember so badly. He needed to know if there was any way to keep her safe permanently. That was when he saw the distress signal coming from an old space station called Archive 7. The station appeared on his scanner as just a blinking dot at first. It was ancient, built centuries ago, now abandoned and falling apart. Most of the hull was dark. Only a few sections still showed signs of power. The distress signal was weak, barely reaching across the distances of space. Robert should have ignored it. Could be a trap. It could be a way for hunters to catch him. But something made him investigate. He carefully approached the station, keeping Ember in the cargo hold in case he needed to leave quickly. Inside the station was cold and dead. Dust floated in the air. The corridors were dark except for Robert's flashlight. His footsteps echoed on the metal floor as he searched for the source of the signal. He found it in the central archive room. The room was filled with ancient data terminals, old computers, and storage devices that had not been used in centuries. They covered every wall. A single terminal was still active, its screen glowing softly in the darkness. That was where the distress signal came from. Robert approached carefully and pressed a button. The terminal came to life with a holographic display. Ancient files began to scroll across the screen. He could see dates going back thousands of years. He saw pictures. He saw text in languages he did not recognize. But some of it was in Standard Galactic, the language everyone spoke. Robert started reading. What he found made him forget to breathe. The files told a story of ancient human civilization. Thousands of years ago, before the Valerian Empire existed, humans were part of a great alliance with other species. There were Drakens in that alliance. Intelligent, powerful beings who could work with technology in ways no other species could. Humans and Drakens fought together against tyranny. They built great cities together. They created wonders together. But then something happened. The Valerian Empire rose to power. They were brutal and ruthless. They wanted to control everything. They saw the Draken species as a threat. They saw the human alliance with Drakens as dangerous. So the Valerian Empire declared war. The battle was long and terrible. Millions died. The Drakens fought fiercely to protect their allies, but the Valerian Empire had superior numbers and superior weapons. Eventually the alliance was destroyed. The Draken species was hunted almost to extinction. Humans were enslaved or scattered across the galaxy. The great friendship between humans and Drakens was forgotten. And the Valerian Empire made sure everyone forgot it. The history books were rewritten. The old records were destroyed. People were told that Drakens never existed, that they were only myths and legends. Humans were told they had always served the Valerian Empire. The truth was buried under thousands of years of lies. Robert felt tears on his face as he read. He thought about Ember, about her suffering, about her loneliness. And he understood that none of it was her fault. She was being punished for something her ancestors did thousands of years ago. She was being hunted because of ancient history that most people did not even know was real. He spent hours in the archive, copying files onto data chips, storing as much of the truth as he could carry. Then he made his way back to his ship. Ember was waiting in the cargo hold. Her scales glowed softly when she sensed Robert's return. But the glow changed when Robert showed her the files. He connected the data chips to the ship's main computer and displayed the ancient records on every screen he could access. Images flooded across the displays. Pictures of Drakons and humans standing together. Records of battles fought side by side. Documents of a friendship that had been destroyed. Robert felt Ember's emotions flow through their telepathic connection. She felt overwhelmed. She felt pain. She felt grief for all the years her species had suffered. But she also felt something else. She felt recognition. She felt hope. Through her patterns of light, Ember sent Robert images and feelings. She showed him that the story was real. She showed him that her ancestors had indeed fought with humans. She showed him that the friendship had been genuine and powerful. "This changes everything," Robert said aloud. "If people know the truth, if they understand that humans and Drakons were allies, that we fought together, that we were friends, then maybe things could change. Maybe people would understand that you are not a weapon. You are a person. You deserve to exist." Ember's entire body glowed bright blue and gold. Her patterns of light moved in ways Robert had never seen before. They moved with purpose. They moved with determination. Robert realized something in that moment. They could not keep hiding. They could not keep running. The truth was too important. They had to find a way to share it with the galaxy. They had to find people who would listen. They had to find others who believed that the ancient friendship could be restored. Robert plotted a new course. Instead of running away, they would fly toward the rebel networks, toward the underground resistance movements, toward anyone who might listen to what he had discovered. The hunt for them would continue. The danger would only increase. But now Robert knew they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting to restore a forgotten truth. And that changed everything. Robert's ship approached the rebel station with extreme caution. The underground network had been willing to meet with him after he sent them the ancient files. They had agreed to listen to his story. But Robert knew that trust was dangerous in these times. Anyone could be an informant for the Valerian Empire. Anyone could turn them in for credits. The rebel station was hidden inside an asteroid field, cloaked by sophisticated technology that made it nearly invisible to scanners. Only ships that knew the exact location could find it. Robert followed the coordinates carefully as he guided his vessel through the dangerous rocks. One wrong turn could crash them into an asteroid and destroy everything. Inside the station, hundreds of people waited. They came from different worlds, different species, different backgrounds. Some were human. Others were Zalthians with their blue skin and 4 arms. Some were Kathrani, insectoid creatures with compound eyes. All of them had one thing in common. They were fighting against the Valerian Empire's control. A woman named Helen approached Robert as he landed. She was tall and strong with gray streaking through her dark hair. She had seen many battles. She carried the weight of leadership on her shoulders. "You have the Drakon," Helen said. It was not a question. "I have Ember," Robert replied. "And I have the truth about what happened to her species." Robert showed Helen and the other rebel leaders the files from Archive 7. He told them everything he had learned. He explained the ancient alliance between humans and Drakons. He showed them the evidence that the Valerian Empire had destroyed that friendship through violence and lies. The rebels listened carefully. Some nodded slowly. Others looked shocked. A few seemed skeptical at first. But as Robert continued to explain, and as they examined the ancient documents, more and more people began to understand. "This is incredible," Helen said quietly. "If this is true, if people across the galaxy knew this truth, everything could change. The Empire's power depends on people believing their official stories. If humans learn they were once allies with the Drakons, if they understand that the Empire lied to them for thousands of years, it could spark a revolution." Robert felt hope rising in his chest. Maybe they could do this. Maybe they could actually change things. "We will help you," Helen said. "We will spread this truth across every network we can reach. We will make sure the galaxy knows what really happened." Over the next month, the rebels worked to prepare. They gathered the ancient files. They created broadcasts designed to share the truth with as many people as possible. They contacted underground networks on 100 different worlds. They prepared for the moment when they would release everything to the public. But they needed something more powerful than just information. They needed proof that Drakons were real. They needed Ember to show the galaxy that she existed. That she was alive. That she was not a myth. Ember agreed to do this even though she was terrified. Robert could feel her fear through their telepathic connection. She had spent her entire life hiding, imprisoned, treated as a thing to be studied rather than a being to be respected. Now she would have to reveal herself to the entire galaxy. The day of the broadcast came. Robert stood next to Ember in the transmission chamber. She was glowing softly, her scales reflecting the light of the equipment around them. Millions of people across the galaxy were about to see her. Billions would eventually know she existed. Helen counted down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Transmit. The broadcast went out across every frequency the rebels could access. It reached private communications networks. It broke through the Valerian Empire's information blockades. It spread to news stations and personal devices and military vessels. Everywhere in the galaxy, people suddenly stopped what they were doing and looked at their screens. And they saw Ember. They saw her scales glowing with brilliant colors. They saw her wings folded against her back. They saw her amber eyes, intelligent and alive. They heard Robert's voice explaining the truth about her species. They learned about the Ancient Alliance. They learned about the lies the Valerian Empire had told them. But then something happened that nobody expected. Ember did something extraordinary. Her biocrystalline core, the organ the Valerian Empire had hunted her species for, began to shine with incredible brightness. It was like a second sun being born inside her body. The light grew and grew until it was almost too bright to look at. But the light was not destructive. It was beautiful. It was alive with information and energy and power. And through that light, Ember accessed something ancient and vast. She connected to technology that had been dormant for thousands of years. Ancient systems that humans and Drakons had built together in the long ago past. Systems that had been sleeping, waiting for a Drakon to awaken them. Across the galaxy, things began to happen. Old weapon systems powered down. Military stations that had been controlled by the Valerian Empire suddenly went quiet. Communication networks that had been restricted suddenly opened. Technology that should have been impossible to access suddenly became available. And then, in the transmission that was still going out to billions of people, Ember revealed the biggest shock of all. Through her connection to the ancient systems, she showed proof that she was not alone. There were other Drakons. Dozens of them. Hidden in stasis chambers on distant worlds. Protected and preserved in secret locations that the Valerian Empire never found. The Drakon species was not extinct. It was sleeping. And it had been waiting for thousands of years for humanity to prove itself worthy again. The shock rippled through the galaxy like a shockwave. In that single moment, everything changed. The balance of power shifted. The lies of the Valerian Empire were exposed. Humans and countless other species suddenly understood that they had been deceived for millennia. And they understood that their ancient friends, the Drakons, had never abandoned them. Robert felt Ember's emotions through their connection. She was exhausted from using so much power. But she was also filled with hope. For the first time in 300 years, she was not the last of her kind. She was the beginning of a new age. Within hours, the rebel forces launched their offensive against the Valerian Empire. Within days, worlds began to rise up and reject the Empire's control. Within weeks, a new galactic alliance began to form. A widowed mechanic and a broken creature bought for 2 credits had somehow managed to change the course of history. Robert looked at Ember and smiled. Eleanor would have been proud of him. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." Ember's scales glowed a soft, peaceful blue. Through their connection, Robert felt her contentment. They had found each other in the darkness. And together they had brought light back to the galaxy.